So I'm Kendra Kunoff, and welcome to this virtual space. I've gotten a couple of questions recently and pieces that have come up in the work that I do with people, and really this is a theme for many, many years, but it's been really alive lately that I wanted to talk about, and that's this idea of being met in relationship. And I posted earlier that I was going to speak live, and then I'd be speaking on, I called it the myth of being met. And one of my friends commented and said, the myth, question mark, like, gotta see that. And I call it a myth, on purpose. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that there's nothing to this idea of actually, someone who's really our match or who is a good fit. But I call it a myth for a few reasons. So here we go. The myth of being met in relationships. And please feel free to post your comments, any questions. I love it when people disagree too. So if you disagree, put that in there. Let's have a little Facebook Live tussle. There's a couple pieces, and I'm gonna give the bullet points, and then I'll go into each one. So the first reason that I call it the myth of being met is, to put it bluntly, is it's never going to happen. You will absolutely never be met, feel met, like find the perfect one. That's point number one. We'll come back to that. The second piece is almost antithetical, but it's actually not, which is that you're actually already always being met. I promise. That's the second piece. The third one is what I call in one of the courses that I teach, the Authentic Relating Comprehensive, we call it being the unicorn. I've been calling it be the permission giver, be the one who goes first. Oh, Laura says, can I speak a little louder? Maybe let me know if this is better. I can put headphones on if I need to, but I can also move a little bit closer. So Laura, let me know if I'm talking loud enough now. Okay, so just to recap right there, the myth of being met, the first piece is it's never going to happen. The second piece is it's always already happening. And the third piece is, can you be, the third piece really goes into it. I'm going to tell a personal story about myself and my relationship, and then talk about how we can be the unicorn or be the permission giver. So thanks, Laura. Thanks for letting me know. It's like if you've got spinach in your teeth or something, you don't want to let somebody go for 30 minutes talking when you can't hear them. So thank you. So the first piece that I want to talk about, and this is kind of the downer. I mean, they all are. They go up and down. But the first piece is there is this way. Well, let me start first with where this comes from. So I hear this as a complaint a lot. And it comes up differently. I'm going to speak kind of men and women, though it also, there's ways that this complaint shows up internally from the feminine parts of ourselves and the masculine parts of ourselves, whether we are a man or a woman. But I'm gonna speak mostly man-woman because that's how I hear that. Those are the people who bring the complaint to me. So while I know that this is across the board, that's where I'm going to speak. And it comes up a little differently, but I'll hear a lot of women, for instance, talk about like, I need a man who meets me, and I'm not feeling met, whereas my conscious man, why can't he meet me in the realm of intimacy? And I hear this one both from men and women. I hear this sort of like, I want to be met at the level of depth that I'm at, or, he, she hasn't really done the level of work I've done. They're not at my level. That's where I hear it. And again, I want to say, number one, I'm talking about basically healthy relationships in the sense of that there's not actual abuse happening. And I totally missed the second piece, but that, but this idea, but there's sort of this complaint, they're just not at my level. When am I going to find somebody who meets me, who's like at my level of depth or my level of, or who can meet me in all these areas? And whenever I hear that, there's just this little part of me that cringes and is like, give it up. It's never going to happen. Hi, Casey. Nice to see you. And what I mean by that is that whether you're a man or a woman, some part of you will always long for something more. The feminine within each of us, whether we're a man or a woman, but I see it more prevalently in women, will always long for more closeness, more connection, more love in a certain way, more, in some way we could call it being seen or being heard, like can he listen to me? Does he get me? That is never going to be satisfied. You may very well find a man who can listen to you, who can reflect you, who can, all these things, and then you'll have some other complaint. Or wanting to be met sexually. Like, it doesn't mean you're not going to have great sex or that you shouldn't be compatible, or like if there's really a mismatch that you should just stay. It's just that we will always, and this is, it's human nature, we will always long for more. So if you're waiting to be met so that you don't have to feel the part of you that is longing or that's craving something, then you will always be disappointed. So I'm just going to say that again, because it's a little different than compatibility. Like, there are definitely places where I think it's important to get honest on both sides. What do I really need, and are we really compatible? And being willing to say when we're not. So that's a separate conversation. But there's often this the desire to find a man or a woman who meets me is a way of trying to not have to feel the part of ourselves that longs, that craves, that feels in some way, that feels the way that we're always alone, the part of us that can never actually be filled by another human being, man or woman, whether it's sex or intimacy or connection or intellectual depth. Like, some part of us just can't be filled by another human being. And as long as we are going to a relationship in order to not have to feel that part of ourselves, we will be disappointed every time. We used to say in the Authentic Man program, relationship is a terrible place to get something. And that's the same principle. It's really recognizing the part of us that's going to a relationship in order to get something from another person, in order to have a part of us that feels incomplete, be completed. So that's the first point, which is never going to happen. So just let it go. The more that you're going to relationship craving that, basically the more disappointed you're going to be, and the more that it's always going to be this kind of irritation, frustration. Why can't I find a man or woman who meets me? So on the flip side, and this really isn't contradictory, although it sounds like it is. So the second piece is, it's always happening. No matter who you are, how much work you've done, how deep you are, like how extraordinary you are, what a great lover you are. Like, if you have this complaint, I promise you that in some way, you are already always being met at the exact level that you are. The people that you are, either you could look at it from the level like the people that you're attracting to you, you're attracting them for some reason. We could psychologize this to your unmet childhood needs, or your wounding around your mother or your father, or the part of you that's afraid that actually you're going to be alone forever, that's sort of magnetizing something. So about the way that we draw people towards us. But also, and this is kind of the crazy part, is that we create in the people around us, we create them, I guess is what I'll say. And not like, oh, we get to fix them and turn them into who we want them to be. And so much of this is often unconscious. And this is actually the piece I want to touch on in the final piece of this, is that unconsciously we're often creating the people around us to be exactly the thing we're most afraid of. We create them to be someone who can't meet us, or who will always be leaving us, or who is giving their attention to something or someone else, or who has the same complaints that our mother did, or we sort of, and it's a little bit mysterious. Like, again, sometimes we know where these things come from, and sometimes we don't. And I personally find most of that less important than simply acknowledging that it's true and starting to discover, like, how am I creating this? And it's important to bring in a distinction between responsibility and fault. So it's nobody's fault. You don't need to blame them, but you also don't need to blame yourself. It's nobody's fault, but you can actually take responsibility. In what way? I talked to a woman the other day who realized that she creates helpless men around her. She's like dying for a man who can take care of her, can see what's going on and lead the way, and yet she's talking about her husband, and she's like, he's got this helpless thing, and she was feeling almost on the brink of thinking, maybe we need to separate, like we need to be done because I don't know what's going on here. And then she realized that her past relationship, she did the same thing. She had this great man, and he became completely helpless. Now, are they also responsible? Of course. But if you're the one watching this video, let's start with you. Because we can always look at where the other person is responsible and can do something. And that is actually part of the dynamic. As long as we're looking for how they're responsible, then that is I hate to get kind of like new agey with this, but that's actually the vibration, or that's the dynamic that we are bringing to the relationship. Whether we actively nitpick or blame them, or we just internally are like, oh, why don't they do their share of blah, blah, blah? And it might be their share of the housework, and it might be their share of the personal growth. It doesn't matter. The content is less important than the quality that you're actually bringing to the relationship. And if you're bringing like, oh, how come they never ... fill in the blank, that's the quality you're bringing. And it's inside of this. So that's just one example. But I promise you that your relationships they'll transform. I can't say exactly how, but they will literally transform the minute that you start to say, what dynamic do I want to bring here? And the minute you start saying, how did I create this? And therefore, in what way can I shift this? soon as you start doing that, so then again, there's, a lot of practices around that, and specific, I can speak maybe in a different Facebook Live to answer specific questions around shifting dynamics, because they're very personal. They really, it depends on what it is you want in the relationship. What is the actual dynamic that you're wanting to create, either shift or create? So for the purposes of this video, I'll just speak to, again, the second piece is that you're always already being met. And the question is, how am I creating that? And what could I? And I would say the first place to go is actually just that awareness. And the second is like, what could I shift if I was willing to? What and how could I shift in myself that might change this dynamic? And so I suggest this in this order. First, the awareness. Second, what could I shift and how, if I was willing? And only after all of that comes this question of, am I willing? What am I actually willing to do? And then part of what that does is that, again, it's no shame and no judgment. But if you're not willing, then it again comes back to this place of my responsibility, and that I have to admit to myself, oh, I'm not willing to do that. And I might have a lot of really good reasons, and other people might agree with your reasons, and maybe they're objectively true, like, who knows? But there's a really, frankly, I find this place to be incredibly empowering. The place where, whether I'm willing or not willing, but the place of simply saying, oh, I'm not willing to do that. And it's just back on me. And I either say, therefore, I'm willing to accept the dynamic as it is, or I need to leave the relationship. It just changes the question. It changes the question when I say, how am I creating this? And what am I willing to shift in service of potentially shifting this dynamic or this relationship? And then being willing to admit if I'm not, but taking responsibility for not being willing to shift that. So the third piece of this, I spoke to about how can we be the unicorn in our relationship, or how can we be the permission givers? And before I go into that, I want to tell a little story about me and my current partner. And I want to give enough content and context for this to make sense, but I don't want to go into the whole history of our relationship. Suffice to say that we had been in some form of relationship for, now it's 6 years, so this was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So, there had been a good 4 years, 4.5 years of these different dynamics that had pieces that really worked and pieces that didn't work, pieces that I loved, pieces that I complained about chronically. But the beauty of this is that I could easily say, and frankly, pretty much anyone who would look at our relationship from the outside would have agreed with me, that he was the one who was more guarded, that he was the one who was kind of putting like a stop on our relationship, that I was the more available one, that I was the more kind of emotionally aware one, that, just like it was an easy story for me to tell. It was an easy story for me to believe. And really, people like looking from the outside, they did say that, and they would say that. And it probably objectively true. But what's really extraordinary is that through the processes we went through, and I can talk about some of those pieces in a separate Facebook Live, but one of them was completely breaking up and me putting myself on a 6-month no-man diet, where not only was I not in that relationship, but I took dating off the table, I took sex off the table, Um, I basically said, I'm going to remove anything, any way that I'm trying to get my kind of like, narcissistic hit met from the masculine. I'm just going to remove that. And so that included him, and we have other dynamics in our life, including a child, which meant that we continued to stay in relationship, but totally took romantic, sexual dating dynamic off the table, which first of all was a huge reset button. But to come back to the story, when we came back and began to re-engage with each other and ask this question, that after my 6-month no man diet, he had dated somebody else, which I think was actually really good for us, and felt like, hey, there's still something here. And we began to have the conversations and the exploration of what is it and how do we want to have it. That the biggest shift that happened for us, I mean, there were lots of conversations we had, and we, and ways that we fell into old patterns and then said, whoa, if that's the way it is, we're not doing that. But when I look now, basically 2 years later, and our relationship has just shifted dramatically. And I could easily have said for the first 4 years of our relationship, like, he doesn't meet me. I want a man who meets me. That the ways in which I feel met now are extraordinary. The biggest shift that happened is that I stopped withholding myself. And my excuse, so we all have them, and sometimes, we might have good reasons and you might want to stick to your reasons. But my excuse was that he was the one withholding. And I could say, there could be the part where I didn't want to get hurt or go too far in, if he wasn't going to meet me. But also, I was like, well, I don't want to make him uncomfortable. He's saying, like, this is how I want it to go, so I guess that's how he wants it to go. I'm going to meet him where he's at. And I really realized when I came back to the relationship, I was unwilling to do that. I was unwilling to do it with him, and I just realized I was unwilling to do it with anybody. That my commitment to myself, more than anything, was I want to love people as much as I do, no matter what. And they may not want it. And then they get to say, no, thank you, please leave me alone, and I'll honor that. But I wasn't going to walk on eggshells and sort of, check, like, is this much love okay? What about this? Like, I just want to love people as much as I do without trying to figure out how much they want. And that has been the biggest shift. So ultimately, I was withholding my love. It was easy to see how he was withholding his, and easy to blame him for that. But what actually made the biggest shift was me not waiting for him to say yes to more, not waiting for anything except for me to say, yes, I do actually love you. I care about you. I like you in these ways. And just to bring it, offer it, give it, share it, in all the ways I do. And then the ways that that's impacted him without we haven't had to, like, talk about it, or, I didn't even realize it for a while. And then I was like, oh, that's what happened. So that's a specific story, but it demonstrates, again, this piece that in some of my authentic relating circles we call Be the Unicorn, or that for me, really looking over the span of like 15 years of teaching intimacy, relationship, communication work, the thing that I have heard people say over and over and over again is, well, you gave us permission. And usually they're referring to, we set up some sort of context, or I create, I give you a sentence stem to fill in, like I create the container in which you get to be who you already want to be. You get to love as fully as you actually do. You get to be generous to the person in front of you because I give you permission. And I say, stop waiting for my permission. Or maybe, can I just give it to you right now? You have permission to love every person in front of you as much as you actually do. And that can be anywhere from in a conversation with a new person, or even somebody that's already in your life, but there's that sense like, oh, we always talk about the conversation's too shallow. How can they don't want to have a deeper conversation. And I say, you don't know. You don't know until you've tried. And most people don't try. And what happens then is that we have all these people walking around, sitting next to each other, thinking the person next to them doesn't want to have a deep conversation. And the person next to them is thinking the same thing about you. So I say, if you're the one watching this video, just stop it and ask the question you really want to ask. You can preface it like, hey, I feel a little awkward asking this, but what I really want to know is, when was the last time you cried? Or what really moves you? Or, whatever. Something like, you be with that person, and what would be the kind of conversation you would really want to have, and start to create it. So the same goes for your intimate relationships, that there's often this sense like, well, this is what's happening, so it must be what they want. So I'll fit myself into what it seems like they want in order to keep the relationship going, in hopes that it deepens later, but meanwhile, I'm chronically frustrated but pretending that I'm not. So just stop it. I say that jokingly because it's much simple, but it's not easy. But start to bring, not by asking them to do the thing. For instance, again, I hear this a lot from women or from the feminine partner in a relationship, like, oh, well, I just want him to take charge. And then they're like, maybe I could ask him to do that. Or how do I get him to do that? And I say, stop waiting for him to take charge. You need to do the thing that you actually need to stop taking charge. And even telling him or asking him, like, would you take charge more often? That's you taking charge. So it's maybe harder in some ways than you think, but it's simple. It's like, oh, can I bring my part of the dynamic that I want without waiting, without saying that there's any conditions on me bringing it? If what I want is deeper intimacy, can I bring my part of that before saying like, well, I'll bring it once they show that they're trustable, and that they can handle it, or once they da-da-da-da-da. It's basically conditions on bringing the part of you that you're longing to bring to relationship anyway. So again, there's a lot of specifics in that, and I'm happy to work with anybody more individually on the specific about you, your particular relationship, what you actually want, because the practices are too nuanced to say that there's like a one size fits all for any of that. But the final piece really is about, you can be the permission giver. Imagine everywhere in your life that you're waiting for permission to be you, to bring the depth that you want, to be as vulnerable as you want to be. And just imagine how many other people you walk by, or you sit next to, or you have a conversation with, who are also just dying for somebody else to give them permission. You could be that person. You could be the person who brings the vulnerability. You could be the person who brings the depth, the softness, the slowing down of the conversation. You have all that power, or for lack of a better word. So again, the myth of being met in relationship, and the whole first part I spoke to is basically the way it's never going to happen. You're never going to feel met. You will always long for more. So as long as you're waiting to have that feeling go away, you will always be disappointed. and you will blame the people in your life, and especially your intimate partners. You'll blame them for that feeling. So the sooner that you can actually fall in love with that part of yourself that longs for more, the sooner you can actually have that space with your partners. The second piece is that you're always already being met, is that there's a real beauty and frankly, it's like a deeply grounded place of empowerment when you're willing to say, how am I creating this dynamic? And what and how could in what way could I shift it just by shifting inside myself? Before asking them to do anything different, in what ways am I willing to actually shift inside myself? In shifting the dynamic, not pretending to be okay with things that you're not okay with, but in genuinely shifting the energetic dynamic on your own side, because you are always already being met. And then the final piece that I just spoke to was all about how can you be the permission giver? How can you bring it first? That not only will you be more fulfilled because you get to be who you are longing to be. You're longing for somebody to say, please, like, bring all of yourself. Please be you. Please, like, and so you get to do that already. You will be more fulfilled, I promise. And it's an act of generosity to everybody around you. Thank you for those of you who joined me live for all or part of this. Thank you for those who are watching the replay. I certainly hope if any of you have questions, or if you do begin to bring this inquiry into your own life and relationship and you need any support, just reach out to me. I'm very easy to find, and sending you all lots of love and wishes for all the kinds of relating that you are most deeply desiring in your life. Thank you.